Thank you very much. Hey, everyone. Glad to see so many people live and in person, right? It's been a while since we've had the chance to do this. So we actually have appeared as a panel before, a virtual panel. So we were excited to be able to come together in person, see how tall, thin everyone is or is not, right? There were all of those fun things happening. So I'm going to move us forward. Let's go ahead and get the presentation up and running. My name is Dr. Kelli Klindtworth. I work for an organization called North Highland. We are management consultants. We have a global presence, but certainly one here in the Portland area and then also in Seattle. We actually work across a number of sectors, not solely the energy and environment space. And my role within the firm is focused on workforce and talent challenges that we see within, say, the Fortune 100 and then other special clients that we want to work with to help solve these problems. We typically are seeing things in the workforce. I think a lot of what you're seeing on the screen right now is not a surprise to you. There are trends that are concerns within the world of energy and the environment around transition activation, making sure you have the right business insights and the data as you're making decisions about what do you do with your workforce, and then how do you really make those workforces more adaptable. Which are all things that I think are top of mind for employers, regardless of the sector. And then there are these really interesting things happening. Small applicant pool, right? We're seeing that the workforce is absolutely shrinking. We have fewer and fewer candidates, not because people don't want to change jobs, but there's a whole lot of people who don't want to work in the systems that we have in place today. A lot of, in your sectors in particular, concerns around employee safety. And what does that look like? And what are we doing to make sure that we keep employees safe? And that's safe in terms of physical safety, but also their mental and social well-being. So when we talk about who is coming to the workforce and why, these are all things that are, vitally important to the candidates that we're speaking to. And then I think just kind of keeping in mind that we're all struggling with work from home, work from the office. That's not always an option with some of the roles that you have people in your organizations filling, right? There's some things you simply cannot do remotely. So making sure that people have the right kind of balance within their lives, and how do we as organizations make sure we address that. So those are all topics that we want to make sure we cover for you today and that we talk about. But before I introduce our panel to you, I want to make sure that you all have the chance to tell us a little bit about what you're thinking. So we're going to use this tool called menti.com. If you have your phone, because everybody always has their phone, we would love for you to pull your phone out, go to menti.com, and you'll see a code on the screen in front of you, the 36961311. If you could do that for me. You guys got that? There should be a presentation that will come up. You might actually just see the screen on your phone. And I'm going to ask you to fill in some answers. A couple of them are, free form, and some of them are multiple choice, and they're going to populate as we go. And this will allow us to kind of guide the conversation into the things that are most interesting to you. So let's try one out. First question, what questions about workforce are top of mind for you? So I'm going to give you like 30 seconds to start putting things in. I can go back to the code. Okay. It's also on the top of this page. Thank you for that. All right. So we're getting some answers. Come on, I want to see those thumbs working like 12-year-old girls, right? Text like you mean it. Cool. Retention, happy employees. Great. All right, good. These are all the things that I think we're hoping to cover today, and we'll come back to the slide, so you can go ahead and keep filling it in. I'm going to move us along and actually ask our panel to introduce themselves really quickly. So I've already done my thing. You know who I am. But Dan, would you mind?
Sure. Good morning. I'm Dan James. I am Chief Workforce and Strategy Officer of the Bonneville Power Administration. I'm one of 4 what we refer to as front office executives. I have HR, strategy, stood up a new culture office, which I'll say more about that in a minute, communications, and EEO, and our research arm. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks. Vicki?
Good morning, everyone. My name is, do I have to turn this on? It should be on already. Okay. Good morning, everyone. My name is Vicki Ng. I'm the Senior Manager of Talent Acquisition at Portland General Electric. PG is Oregon's largest electric utility company. We have about 3,000 employees, and I joined recently, 5 months ago. Prior to that, I was in the sporting goods industry working at Adidas for over 12 years. So really good to be here. Thank you.
Fantastic.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amy Essig, CEO of Farallon Consulting, and many of you are familiar with Farallon. We're a, a West Coast-based firm. We're present in Washington, Oregon, and California. We have 7 locations, and next year we celebrate 25 years. So primarily our services that we offer are environmental and engineering, and so that's kind of been our footprint in terms of area of expertise and the talent pool that we look for.
All right, fantastic. Thank you. Okay, so I have a question out here for you all again with the Menti. Don't forget the code's at the top if you're not there. What do you think the biggest challenge facing the energy and utility and environment business workforce is today? So I'd love for you guys to be filling that in. But as you're filling that in, one of the things that we talk about a whole lot is culture and how important culture is to attracting top talent. Dan, you guys have done some really interesting things at Bonneville. Would love to hear more about that from you.
Sure. Thank you. So I mentioned I am one of 4 front office executives at the Bonneville Power Administration. And I know that you know this, but I just want to say, just to set the record straight, I don't work at Bonneville Dam. I work at the Bonneville Power Administration. We are a power marketing agency. We sell the electricity from 31 large federal dams and the 1 nuclear plant at Hanford. We also operate most of the region's high voltage transmission. We are headquartered in Portland. We have a large facility for transmission in Vancouver, and then 25 field offices as far east as Kalispell, Montana, my hometown. So with that, culture is a challenge. We are West Siders, we're East Siders, we are urban people, we are very rural people, and we come together around our mission to provide clean, renewable hydropower to the citizens of the Northwest. Having said that, we, like every other large organization, has been experiencing lots of change, lots of tension. And with that, our new administrator, well, he's not so new anymore, John Hairston, who became administrator about 2 years ago, when he stepped into that top job, said, I want to take your deputy administrator slot, if you will. I'm in one of our executives in what's called the Senior Executive Service, which is a federal thing. And I want to repurpose it, and I want to put a front office executive in charge of people and strategy. So you think about that all the time. Now, I'm kind of an extrovert, and so it was a natural fit. But what that really meant was really bringing a focus on our internal culture. My prior boss, Elliot Mainzer, used to say, culture eats strategy for lunch. You can have the greatest business strategy in the world, but if you don't have the right culture, it will be a hindrance in executing on that strategy. So what we did is we stood up a new culture office. I created the new position of Chief Culture Officer at BPA, and we brought diversity and inclusion, which already existed, into that organization. And so one of the things we're doing there is working on external engagement with our employees. With the pandemic, we haven't been together as much, except for those mission essential people, our ops center people, our linemen and line women who keep the lights on. So what we need to do is get into each other's spaces again, the way that we used to. We also have to recognize that we're coming out of a period where there's a number of our people that disagreed with each other strongly on issues like vaccinations and COVID. And so we've got to bring our people back together around our mission, even though we had pretty strong disagreements about some things like that over the last few years. And finally, well, not finally, but another big element of this is recruitment and retention. So one of the things we did is create a new position in our culture office to be doing external recruitment, but really focused on the people aspect of that. Not just, are you qualified to work at the Bonneville Power Administration to be an engineer or a biologist or an accountant, but what communities are you part of? Veterans, Asian Americans, Latinx, African Americans, going to those affinity groups, if you will, for engineers, biologists, accountants, lawyers, and doing more direct recruitment with them. We're also using our employee resource groups as our ambassadors, those groups that are already inside Bonneville, helping on the recruitment front. And finally, we're going to be spending a lot more time on college campuses and at college fairs, telling the good story about Bonneville. Not only are we a federal agency, but we're an operating utility, but the takeaway message is come be part of the clean energy economy in the Northwest because of the role that Bonneville plays. Thanks.
Great, that's wonderful, thank you. We start in culture because what we've seen is the last, 25 years or so, we've been focused on the customer experience, right? The end user experience. And rumor has it the next 10 to 15 years are going to be about taking that experience knowledge and what we've done for our customers and turning that internally to make sure that our employees are having great experiences as well. Because we're here, right, we know that there are some companies in the area that do this really well and have no problem attracting talent that may or may not be tied to sports and apparel and those things. Vicki, you are actually from one of those companies and then made the decision to go to PGE. Can you tell us a little bit about that transition and maybe what PGE is doing to make it easier for others?
Absolutely. I think the pandemic has forced a lot of us to rethink about our priorities and our values. And when I look at the next generation of talents, their values in terms of where they want to work and what they want to be doing is very much linked to purpose-driven work. And so after 12 years at Adidas, when PG reached out to me, I was really intrigued by this purpose-driven mission around clean energy, around making an impact in my community, and also in the environment. So I was really intrigued by that. I just had never heard of, PG as a potential employer for me. And also when I shared the news with a lot of my colleagues and friends, they were also quite surprised. And so to what you're saying, Dan, I think there's a huge opportunity to really double down on your employer value proposition. So as an organization, this would be a great time to do so, right? You're not maybe hiring as much as you were before. You have some more capacity potentially in your HR and TA teams. Being able to really refine who you are, why you exist as an organization will allow internal employees to connect back to the purpose of your organization and why, and also showcase to external talents why they should be joining you. For me, I think there's a huge unique selling proposition in the energy and utilities industry for talent that you might not have always considered to join the industry. Right now we're kind of at this weird crux in terms of the labor market. You've got demand for labor exceeding talent that's available. You also have what we're seeing as a white-collar recession, which has really never happened before. Usually before recession, you're seeing blue-collar jobs being taken away, and that's the opposite that's happening right now. So you have an influx of really skilled kind of tech, retail talent that's available in the market, but then you have equally at the same time a huge gap in skilled labor. And so I think that's still going to continue to accelerate. We also have a declining workforce. So over the past 10 years in Multnomah County, we've seen a decrease in the youth population growth by -1%. So how do you tackle that as an organization? I think one of the things that we want to be doing more of is really thinking about how do you address our early career strategy, training and educating and bringing more awareness around jobs in our industry, and doing that at an earlier stage so that when they are ready to enter the workforce, they already have some loyalty or at least brand recognition of who you are and what you stand for.
I'm going to throw you guys an unrehearsed curveball.
Yeah.
You ready? Okay. My guess is that many of our audience members, there are things that we can do in the back office that are different than what our line workers are facing. So what are some of the things that you've seen be effective when we're addressing line workers or people who are more shift working versus back office knowledge workers?
Address in what sense?
Programs, thoughts, mobility. I think historically the careers have been, I do this forever and ever. There's pay advantages when you talk about the employee value proposition, even getting people in to do those very early stage roles. Any thoughts about that from any of you?
Well, I'll start. Yes. One of the challenges I think that we had to deal with during the pandemic was we weren't bringing people together in groups big and small. And to me, there's no replacement for that. Being able to look at somebody in the eye face to face across the table, or standing around the crew room. And so we are really trying to do more of that. Just even if you're going to be with people, even if you can't tell them what they want to hear, which is, a year ago it was, no, you don't have to get vaccinated in order to remain a federal employee. We couldn't say that. On the other hand, just being there to listen. So there was I was heard. I had a hearing. Somebody came out to see me in my space, met me where I am, and listened. We also have been really focusing as a utility, and I'll bet I'll hear this also. One of our aspirational goals is to be the safest utility in North America. And so way before the pandemic, we're really focusing on our safety culture. And that has really resonated with our field crews, our line crews. It's been pretty successful. People that were kind of suspicious about that have really embraced it. And we've taken a step further and gone from physical safety to emotional safety. I mean, that might have sounded like hooey to some people a few years ago, but now they're really embracing that as something that we need to talk about in terms of safety. So that's really helped, I think, in some of the rural parts of our organization.
That's great. I'm going to ask, it's been a long time you've been away from your phones. So we have another question for you. What do you believe will help organizations attract top talent? So there's a multiple choice here. Curious to see, culture, good. So we hit that one well. All right, compensation. Yep, absolutely top of mind for folks. We'll give this a little chance. Amy, so like me, you're in the world of consulting. We get the benefit of having multiple clients and perspectives shared with us. Do you have any thoughts on, things that haven't worked well? Any cautionary tales you want to share with our audience?
I think some of the things that when we consider areas that we've tried, and it's probably really around looking for talent and hiring talent that is aligned with culture. So making sure they're a cultural fit. And if that doesn't ring true, that we need to make a decision sooner rather than later. And so we want that person to be a good fit. They are going to bring opportunities to work on new projects, work with new clients, and it turns out those don't come to fruition. And instead of being a good fit, they're actually become a situation where they leave a huge wake behind them, and they become very detrimental to the organization, and then we don't make a decision quickly enough. So we're looking for an initiative or some strategic hire that we think is going to work out, and they don't end up working out, and it becomes detrimental.
I just want to add on to that as well, Amy. I think absolutely, hiring there's no perfect formula. You're basically evaluating humans evaluating humans. And we've talked a lot about, in my past work, about culture fit and thinking a little bit differently about that and actually hiring for a culture add, right? Because if you're hiring for culture fit, there's certain kind of profiles that you're looking for, and you're therefore limiting your talent pool. And we're all passionate about increasing diversity in our organization. And really, because I saw one of those, I think one of the answers that there's not a lot of people applying for jobs as well too. You need to be challenging your hiring managers and your line managers to think more horizontally about how you see, what you see as top talents and what you see as potential fits to the organization. Someone might not be coming from the top university or have direct experience in the same industry, but they may have the skill sets. They might be able to transfer those experiences into that work and still be successful. You just have never taken a chance on that. So I really love kind of thinking about culture adds to the organization, because that, we all have ambitious goals for our industries, and we need kind of the right type of talent to get us there. And so thinking about what that looks like as well.
And I would add, looking outside the industry, I think it's really critical then if we decide to bring in those folks, the onboarding process is so key. That they're coming with a steeper learning curve. We need to make sure it's consistently applied, that they have opportunities to get additional learnings that they might, another employee or another candidate who's coming in might not need that, but we need to make sure that we're getting them exposure to training, additional education, so they are going to be successful in the long run. The onboarding process, I can't emphasize that enough. That's a really critical part of what we do, which also speaks to the retention. And if an employee has a bad onboarding experience, the chances of them staying on long term are significantly reduced.
I've tried to, when it's my turn to give the executive presentation in what our new employee orientation, or NEO, I've tried to make it fun. I've tried to give people a reason to sort of remember what we call their cohort or their class. I say, this feels like the first day of school to you, right? Look around. These are all people that you all took the oath at the same time. And I continue to refer to the people that I did that with as my classmates, right? We'll see each other and we remember that we were in that cohort together. So one of the things I do is I say, okay, I'm going to ask you to introduce yourself. Maybe it's 15 or 20 of them on every other Monday. But then I'll say, okay, you're going to tell me what you did before, what your new job is going to be, but I also need to hear a fun fact about you, right? And inevitably, that sort of puts a smile on people's face. Some guy owns 21 guitars. Somebody was on a soap opera earlier in their career. I always say, well, I'm the black sheep of my family because I'm the only non-music teacher. So anyway, there are ways to be making connections with people right out of the box.
That's great. I do want to honor the responses that we're seeing in this latest Menti, right? So we all think about culture, and many of you have flagged compensation as a major issue. So in my work, we talk a lot about the compensation challenge that a lot of our clients are facing. And we certainly saw over the last 2 years that it became more and more difficult to be competitive in the world of compensation as salaries started going through the roof and we started seeing talent become more mobile. I spend a lot of time talking to people around, you can't win if you're always going to just be upping the dollars, right? If that's how you're going to solve for the problem. So get really good at cycling through talent. Put your dollars through programs like onboarding, programs like training and skilling, because the reality is that hopefully you'll find somebody to take the job, even if it's not at the upper echelons of compensation. Curious if anybody has thoughts on compensation that they want to share. Do you, or can share?
So in terms of overall compensation, we've spent a lot of time talking about this, and this is top of the list for, you ask any employee, and there's a lot of discussion of this in the overall industry. Firms have made decisions where they're, and we hear this often, they did a straight across the board comp adjustment of 5% for every single employee, no matter what. We haven't taken that approach, and we didn't need to. We have looked at it by level. And so we've done a total comp review. We're getting ready to share that with our employees, and where we need to make adjustments, we will. And I think it's also important to educate employees on what compensation means, what goes into total comp. It's not just salary, it's all the other benefits that an employer offers. And I think there is an opportunity right now in our industry. Typically in the past, we've seen adjustments on compensation very level, consistent with cost of living, 3%. We're seeing that much increase now, 5%, 7%, 8%. It's gone up, and frankly, I welcome that. I think that our industry, if everyone was doing the same thing, and I say we're in a slightly different consulting field, but we don't want to get into commodity mode. We want to do value add, and we want to make sure we're priced appropriately. And if everyone's lowballing one another, then it's eroding our value add that as a whole, that the environmental consulting industry, what we bring to the clients and the services that we offer. I don't want to discount that. You're not seeing attorneys reduce their rates. And they're willing to, they're taking work on, and they're not necessarily doing it for free. And we don't want to do that either. And I pick on attorneys. I'm not meaning to just pick on them, but there's other industries, say tech or otherwise, not discounting rates, really showing here's the things that we can do. We're doing for property transactions. We're saving our clients money. We're providing them opportunities and insights on things that they wouldn't otherwise have known. So I think overall compensation, it's an important subject, and I think it's an opportunity to increase our rates considering where we are right now. And I'm talking about salary in this case.
Great, thank you. I believe we have another question for all of you. So what is a benefit? We were talking about compensation, so this is a great continuation of that. What's a benefit that you wish your organization offered but you don't today? So curious about that. And while you're answering that, we do want to open it up if there are questions from any of you out there. I think we have a roaming microphone, do we? Maybe, maybe not. If not, I'll hand you mine. Are there any questions? It's a quiet group. Oh, okay. If you have a question, I'll repeat it for everyone. That way we can all hear you. No questions? All right. Do you guys want to talk about benefits, interesting benefits? Any thoughts that come to mind as we're seeing this? So this is around remote work, hybrid, cost of living increases. So I love this compensation piece. We're definitely honing in on what's important. Childcare benefits, more training. Any thoughts from you all? Any interesting benefits that you have seen added or that you've added perhaps at PGE or Bonneville?
Well, I'll start. We are a federal agency, and we are tied to federal salary rates with some exceptions. We have made the case in the past for special salary rates for some hard to recruit, hard to retain employees. We really don't like it when we train up a lineman and then PGE hires them away from us after we've trained them because they can pay them more. And so we've really tried to address that and giving us more flexibility. So I would say, and I will say we're working on that aggressively. It's the kind of thing that being a federal agency, we will need some additional authorities, but we're working on that because as an operating utility who competes with other utilities for people, we need to be competitive. We don't necessarily need to be at the top of the salary scale, but we need to be in the game, and we need more flexibilities than we already have. I think at some point we will transition into some of these issues of remote and hybrid or telework. We have a policy now that we are. It's a pilot project where we're allowing about 5% of our employees that are very targeted in one specific area to be working in a remote 100%. The rest of our office workers, those who are not mission essential, those who keep the lights on, are required to be in the office 2 days per pay period, which comes into down to 1 day per week. Now, there is sort of the conversation about the virtual water cooler that more of our employees wish that they were offered 100% remote. My hypothesis is that once we have a chance to test this idea of you being in the office a little bit with your colleagues, again, 1 day per pay or 2 days per pay period, 1 day per week isn't a lot, but it's going to sort of hit that sweet spot, we think. So we're going to be testing this over the next 18 months. But those kinds of flexibilities we think will make BPA attractive. I'll say one more thing, and when we hear people talk about compensation, they not only want to talk about dollars and cents and benefits, but they want the ability to move around. They know how am I going to be able to grow in my career? And one of the things that you find in any organization is the closer you get to the top of the pyramid, there are fewer opportunities for advancement. So we're trying to work on that middle level management and above to give people more opportunities for details within the organization, for example, and make that easier. So those are a couple things that come to mind.
So we, in terms of benefits, we've just made a switch, interestingly enough. We cover employees 100% for the medical premium. And this last year, we are facing a significant increase. And so we had to make the decision whether we are continuing doing that and we have done so for the last 24 years, or we are going to make it and stay with our current provider, or actually make a change and move on to a new provider. And so we decided to continue to absorb the cost. We also, and I saw on the list here, pet insurance. We added that this year, which is a new one, and so we'll see how that goes. The other area that I didn't mention is we are an ESOP, so we're a 100% employee-owned company. We made that switch in 2017. So not only do employees get the benefits of being an ESOP as an ESOP participant, so they have ownership in the company. We also have a 401k, which most companies do. I will say, and the one that's front and center there, the child care benefit, I would love to see us be able to do something with that. When I started in consulting 25 years ago, I look back and I say the number of women that were standing next to me who are in principal roles was, I could count on one hand, it was maybe 10% in the entire company that I was with at the time. There are far greater women that are in the industry, that have stayed in the industry today. And I equate that to a number of things. I equate it to technology advancements, ability to work in this hybrid world. We can thank COVID for that. We were able to transition now to this remote hybrid work that has allowed both men and women alike to be at home and care for their child. And I think that's a huge benefit and allowed people to stay working. Flexibility with work hours and work schedule, and I think we really have to look at, there's all the statistics out there about the number of women who left the workforce during COVID to take care of their children and those who are not coming back. And we have a shortage of talent, there's a war for talent, and that's an ongoing issue that we need to resolve. So that child care benefit, the fact that it's in the middle there does not surprise me at all. And I'd love to see the industry as a whole do something there, and it's an expense we have to figure out a way to pay for it, but it's a very top of mind for me personally.
We also added pet insurance at PG, so I think that's really funny. But I'll also just add that I think in general, when you look at your benefits, it's very, we all have competing priorities, right? Budgets are really tight. When you add a benefit, there's a ripple effect in terms of how that hits the bottom line. And oftentimes employees don't recognize or appreciate it as much as we would hope. What I think is really important is that, at PG, we have employee listening surveys that are really helpful for us to understand what employees are looking for. So every quarter, we send those out and we analyze that data. I love your point, Dan, around internal development, because yes, I joined the company, what's next? Like, what are you doing for me to grow my career, myself? Because a lot of these people also have very much growth mindsets, right? So we do have internal leadership development programs that are available for top talent and high potentials that I think is kind of that added benefit of joining a company. I'm also noticing a shift in the marketplace in terms of what talent is looking for. So in the past, because of the very hot markets, and also tech was driving this as well, they're offering outrageous packages, right? Like you're paying for their MBAs, you're paying, for housing. It's you're making six figures out, straight out of college, right? And people, and so it's driving this market that obviously was not sustainable. Now that we see that with the layoffs that are happening in the tech industry, I see a shift moving away from that. what I'm hearing right now, I'm recruiting for a recruiter. And 1 to 1.5 years ago, that was a very hot market as well. You could not find a recruiter because everyone was hiring. And so now that's not happening as much. People are saying to me, I actually value stability more than compensation. I'm willing to let go a little bit if I'm joining for the right reasons, clear purpose, clear impact, purpose-driven work, and also stability. So if I'm joining the, and obviously we're not 100% immune to what's happening in the marketplace and with inflation, but we do offer more stability than a tech and retail at the moment. And so how are we also then storytelling that as well to the marketplace?
All right, any additional questions from the audience? Things that you...
I have one. For Mike.
Fantastic.
Ring vendor, Dan, you said something about having employees meet in the office 1 day a week. And I'm curious what all three of you would say about how to manage for that hybrid work situation so that you can build culture and thereby build retention. Our firm's very small, so we have kind of the opposite problem, but we still want to get people together. How do you think about that as large organizations in a proactive way that will encourage retention, professional development, and tying people to the culture of the organization?
So the question is around having people come into the office, if that's the policy, and then how do you manage that to make sure that you can build the culture that you're looking for? So this is springboarding off Dan telling us, the 1 day a week, and how does that actually play out, Dan?
Sure. Well, we're in the middle of this pilot, and one of the things that we've not wanted to do is to be so prescriptive that we tell other executives and managers and supervisors, well, this is the day that you need to do this, right? And some of it is managing our facilities, managing parking, managing conference rooms, right? You don't want everybody to pick Wednesday, right? So you want it to be a bit of a, you want organizations to be able to figure out what works best for them, and it's largely working for us now. It's happening organically without us dictating. This is the day that you will all come in. In part, we've watched what's happened even in the Portland metro area. We've had some employers go, start with a lot of flexibility, and it didn't work, and they got very prescriptive, right? So we recognize that we're in a bit of a transitory time. Right now, the sense is that it's working pretty well, but it's also still pretty new. We only started asking our people to come back into headquarters and our Spokane facility after Labor Day because of the COVID numbers being high, right? So we're still pretty early in this, but our sense is that, or our hypothesis is that will work well for people, but we don't want to be so prescriptive, at least not now. Maybe if we talk in 6 months, it might be a little bit different, but not now.
So for us, there's certainly an intentionality there around engagement and engagement events that we do across the firm. And so whether that's at an individual office level, but we are making sure that those who are remote have an opportunity to participate. And so, for example, last year we did a white elephant gift exchange, and that was done online. So everybody at every location had an opportunity to participate, whether they sat in Seattle or they sat in Irvine or they sat in Reno, Nevada, or in Michigan. It didn't matter. So it was like everyone was in the same virtual room together, and so we created an engagement committee, and that was really in place during COVID. And so we were intentional about having monthly events, quarterly events, and that could either be at the office level or the firm-wide level. So it was a forcing function to try and get everyone together, and it wasn't just necessarily going to happen on its own. And we also were recruiting employees in that and getting the new folks and folks who had been around for a number of years saying, what do you want to do? What are some ideas that you have? And recruiting that way in terms of the overall getting people to have an enjoyable, fun work experience, and then celebrating the wins and talking about the things that have occurred, new projects won, new opportunities, somebody passed an exam or a licensure, and what are the traditions that we have done historically over time that we want to continue doing, and bringing the new people in and telling those stories and saying, here's what we're about, here's the things that we do, and what are new things that we want to do and new things that we want to adopt. So that was very much a purposeful driven conversation, and we've continued on with that throughout the years. Even though we're sort of on the other side of things, we're still very much in this hybrid work model. One thing I will say about the hybrid work, and I know we're probably over time, is that I do worry about the new folks coming in, the younger generations who haven't had the exposure to all the work, the new engineer that's coming in who hasn't been able to sit down at a table and go over the design calculations and have the chance to do a debrief on a project. Those conversations, if that person is working in a different location than someone else on their team, that has to be very thoughtful by that person and the manager, making sure, or the principal on the project, making sure that they are actually doing the debrief, that they are actually scheduling the time. And so that requires a different level of engagement by folks who say, I can only talk to that person if they're down the hall from me. I'm not going to set up a meeting by Zoom or by Teams and make sure that's happening. So it does require some training and some nudging with folks to make sure that that's happening.
Yeah, I think there's also, there's hope that there's some sort of technological solution for what you're asking, right? How do we figure out who's in the office when, and we build that culture? I would say that from other industries, my experience has been that let's not overthink it. The good old-fashioned sign-up sheet works really well. And you do that in a low-tech, smaller environment, like what days are you coming in? But I want to just emphasize why that works, because we talk about things like facility constraints, which are very real, but there's also a little bit of employee choice that matters, and it collides with things like our childcare benefits. So I can't come into the office, let's say Tuesday and Thursday, because those are the days that weren't available at my daycare facility. So it's really important that we keep that communication open. And then as you take that to scale, you can use, bigger and better Excel spreadsheets and technologies that will help you as the organizations get larger. But it really is okay for us to say there's a pretty basic fundamental way to do this, and we can sign people up and honor people who maybe don't want to be surrounded, and let people who do want to have a culture fun day come in and have a different experience as well. So I think that's really an important piece of that. Are there other questions? Oh, we do. We have a question over here.
Microphone.
Like your firms, we provide urgent emergency response. And how do you continue to motivate your employees who are going to come in at 2 in the morning when the transformer blows, like our employees are coming in when the ice hits? How have you addressed that specific type of issue, that critical employee that needs to show up at 2 or over the weekend or on Christmas?
Fantastic. The question is around urgent emergency response. So when we have people that need to come in, off hours, Christmas Day, 2 a.m., whatever that may look like, and how we keep people motivated to answer that call. Vicki, I'm totally coming to you on this one.
Yeah, it's a really great question. I don't have the answer for you for that, but we're seeing that in terms of the generational differences with our line workers. So the generation that's been there for the past 20 to 30 years that are retiring at the moment, they're willing to step in and do that overtime because they're attracted to the overtime pay. It's also, part of their values. They're loyal. They're very passionate about the work they do. Then you've got the younger generation that's coming in, and their values are different, right? They want to spend time at home with their families. They don't want to take the overtime as much because they value their personal time as well, too. So you've got this conflict that's happening. I don't know how to solve it, I would say, but I actually think some of it can be tied to hiring. Hiring for attitude, hiring for these values will be really critical. You can build the skill sets, but if they join and you need them to step up for a certain emergency situation, and that's not part of their value system, then you're just building more of that culture in there. And so how do you blend them together and also make sure you're hiring right at the same time?
Yeah, and I think I was working with PGE last year when that ice storm hit, and we saw the same thing, right? There was a shortage of workers and a whole lot of work to be done. One of the things that we learned was there's a lot of barriers to break down so that people have the ability to move between providers, which historically has been a really big hurdle for people to overcome. The pool of people who are willing to do that work is increasingly shrinking. It's generational, it's values driven, there's all sorts of reasons. So we can't make it hard for the people who want to do that for the places that need it. And it really is forcing us to think differently, and barriers to operating. Maybe you have 2 or 3 different places that you're willing to do that. Maybe we come up with a role for people who just want to do emergency response and transfer between different organizations. So there's a lot of maybe creative ways to tackle it, but it is definitely one of the key challenges. Dan?
I will say that one of the things I've learned is the immense pride that our field crews have in what they do. So when you're talking about, the kind of examples that you're citing, that they take it personally when there's at least my experience has been, when there is a system outage or a system emergency. I think some of you know that our organizations, these utilities have mutual aid agreements, so we can step in and help each other when we have problems, be it an ice storm or a fire. Our crew in Kalispell, my hometown, came to the aid of Flathead Electric Cooperative when they had one of those unseasonal snowstorms when all the trees that still had leaves on them fell into the power lines. And so there's a lot of esprit de corps I found between those organizations. But one of the things you can do is that you can highlight that, you publicize it, you thank and thank and thank. You do a lot of internal communications to sort of build up that pride about how your people responded to those kinds of emergencies with pictures and quotes. And occasionally you can give them, even at a federal agency, you can give them an award, whether it's a non-monetary award or a cash award or something. So you have to look at all those tools in your toolbox.
All right, this is my last call for questions from the audience. Anybody? No? Here, I'm going to date myself. Oh, we do have someone.
I have a microphone here. Hold on.
Just a second.
I think it's on. There we go.
Just a short question. How do you guys feel about part-time work and mixing that in with your group?
Oh, sign me up. Thoughts on part-time work?
We very much embrace it. We have a number of people who work part-time, and there's people who will go in and out of part-time depending on if they've had a child, and I've worked part-time at 2 different times during those times. And so we have a number of, I would say maybe 20% of our workforce is part-time, maybe 30.
I think it's great. I think it really depends on the manager and how forward-thinking they are and being able to set up the environment for that, because oftentimes what I've seen coming back from paternity leave especially, you come back part-time, but you're really working full-time hours. So that's dinging the employee even more and not setting them up for success. I worked for a German company prior to PGE, and their benefits are really good, and also their social system. And so they did a lot of job sharing, which was really interesting to me. And so you have 1 job, but then 2 employees maybe coming back from leave, doing that. I think the tricky thing is around benefits and how do you account for that extra cost. But I think if your company is really wanting to provide that support for parents or for people who need that flexibility and also retain and or attract talent, I think it's great. We're just not seeing that, I think, in the U.S. as often as you would maybe in other countries.
I think for us, it's about flexibility of when you work. We don't have as many part-time employees, but we really do want to give our managers more ability to be flexible with the work times, core hours.
Thank you. Okay, so I am going to ask you all to put on your fortune teller hat. So for our audience, this is my last question to you, and we'll go Amy, Vicki, Dan. What is a trend that you think the audience should be paying attention to in the world of workforce?
I'll say 2: technology and innovation, and ESG.
Thank you.
environmental social governance.
Okay.
I would say the workforce decline and the population decline, and how that will impact your company in the mid and long term.
I think that the social changes and how that's impacted the work environment and cultures. We see, the people, old guys like me, working with people that have grown up with expectations around things like diversity and inclusion, and the ability to change as an organization and embrace those new approaches or approaches that are coming to the forefront.
Great, thank you. So that is actually going to wrap up our time together. I want to thank all of you first. I know that you all have very important roles and responsibilities, so taking time out to kind of listen to the thinking. And then also just to thank my panel. The hard thing about workforce is we are in high demand right now. There's a lot of pressure to solve all these problems. So when you all solve all the problems of the world, we'll go on a nice vacation together. I will join you. It'll be great. But thank you, everyone, for your time today. And Greg, I'll hand it back to you.